This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview.
Well, joining us today is George Roach, the CEO of Premier Africa Minerals. Thank you very much for your time again, George. How are you?
Hi, Mark. I'm fine, and it's good to talk to you.
Yes, it's always good to be catching up, George. So we're going to go through some of the recent announcements and just what's been going on site and, of course, with regards to the resource. Now, I know you mentioned in another interview recently some of the issues you've been working on, flow design issues, for example, replumbing, recoveries in the float section. So I won't go over these in much detail. But the report by Senate Engineering, you say you've seen a preliminary report there that have confirmed a number of these issues relating to the flow material between the various components of the plant. Would you be able to share some of those findings with the market in due course? I think some people would be quite keen to see that report, if possible.
Mark, I can't undertake to disclose the entire report. I need to see what's contained within the report firstly. It may be appropriate, may not be that I can. Let me just go back and say that the underlying reason for this was to help us understand the distinction between a commissioning issue and a design issue. And that certainly has clarified a lot of that in our minds. And I think that the progress we've made in the last 5 or 6 weeks has been quite dramatic, particularly with stabilizing the milling circuit and getting material at the right size range to flotation. That was at the heart of the problems that appeared way back over a year ago, and it has remained. And it's only in the last 5 or 6 weeks, in fact, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, that we finally got on top of all the issues associated with this. And a fair amount of this related to design philosophy that was sitting in the background. Anyway, I think we're on top of it. So go back to the report where I can disclose, I will.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, I understand from recent RNSs that pretty much all the efforts are now focused on the flotation plant there. And a couple of points from here that you mentioned that in original test work, mica content was estimated at 17%. In early processing, actual mica content is closer to 27%. So the mica content is higher than what was originally estimated. Why is this, do you think? What's causing it? Does it give you any concerns? Is the plant able to cope with this difference in mica concentrate?
Okay, so there are a couple of points coming out of this one. The first is that the mica flotation section of the plant is actually working quite well. And that's why we're able to reach this sort of conclusion. But the second component of that is that what we're seeing in the lepidolite recovery is coming fairly close to what our latest resource estimates that we published some time ago seemed to indicate was going to be the lepidolite content. So that's good news. And it's around about 5 to 10%. So that in itself, I'm very pleased about. In terms of the other micas part of and or associated with the lepidolite, I think that there are some views that indicate this is likely to reduce as we get deeper into the resource. Bear in mind that we are still in the upper, shallower areas, and that our drilling of over 40,000 odd meters on which we have based the original resource all indicated a marginally different ratio. So I think that as we work down the mine, this is likely to go back. But all that it has done for the moment, is that it has restricted us to an extent to how much dry solid equivalent we could pass into the flotation side of the plant. That's all. Now, that's going to be remedied in the next several days, really, and we can get into
Right.
that just now. So just in summary, I'm not particularly concerned about it. I believe this is something that is going to swing back to where it was as we get deeper into the resource, and it isn't that things can't be managed and that we aren't going to deal with it very adequately.
Okay, thank you. Now, another point from a recent RNS was, I think you said that you have greater than 1,000 tons of mixed mica-rich and spodumene concentrate not to grade. And with recent price improvements, we are looking at ways to commercially realize some value from the product available. Could you give any more details perhaps on this and how that might look like, how you might actually realize some commercial value here?
Well, I think there are a couple of things with this. First of all, in relation to what is standing there, this is product that has been produced slowly and in small quantities when we've had the plant running and so on. But what we're seeing most recently, with a little bit of more stable running, particularly on that mica side, is that the mica lepidolite-rich fraction is running at a constant 2.5, 2.75% Li2O in that it is now becoming a pretty constant and stable product. And there is a market. We are talking to a number of people. Samples of the material have been sent to a number of potential buyers. And I do think that this will go. So that's the one point. The other point is that we've kind of lost sight over the last year of the fact that Zulu has a number of other byproduct potentials. This was always one of them. Others include the tantalum, for which the circuit is not working at the moment, and must be made to work. Another is that we are only processing material above a certain crush size and stockpiling huge quantities of smaller size material, which all is mined, sitting on surface, and will be processed. So there's a lot more to Zulu than just the anticipated SC6 production at the moment.
Okay, and you're actively exploring ways to commercialize them?
Absolutely.
Okay. I just want to get on to the other point about the resident time in float cells, the in-cell slurry density, as you've called it there. I understand there are a couple of fixes here. The throughput issue, where you need certain pumps and valves in the mica section to be upgraded. The grade and recovery issue, the fix would be flow changes between the various flotation cells. And I understand that the problem is expected to be rectified in the coming weeks. I think that was said in the RNS there. But on an interview recently, you said that you expect a milestone late next week and anticipate flow changes resulting in increase of tonnage production. So, I mean, what are we talking here in terms of time? Coming weeks, but then also perhaps the end of next week? You've got an idea, but I'd caution
Mark.
Expectation management.
Yes, I mean, obviously there's a lot of difficulty when it comes to expectation management, and I have there's no certainty in terms of the future. I had anticipated some of this, and I must say, in my mind, I was reminded of the reason why I so often, when I buy a newspaper, ask if I can have tomorrow's today. I wish, I really and truly do. But coming back to the factual situation as we are sitting at the moment, trucks are on their way to the suppliers at the moment as we speak to load. All our export documentation out of South Africa and into Zimbabwe is complete. There's been a recent change in currency situations in Zimbabwe. We have carefully monitored this to establish it's not going to cause a delay at the border. We expect that the duties that are associated with it will be paid during the course of the next 24 hours. The expectation, and I emphasize it's the expectation, is that all of this, the complete requirement for all these various pipe, valve, and so on changes, will be in Zimbabwe, cross the border by some time on this weekend, Sunday evening, with an anticipation they'll be at site on Monday/Tuesday, and an anticipation that with all the planning that is being done, if all of this works out as it has been set up, the people, everything else in place, that this should be done, and the final bolts in place before the end of next week. So that's the anticipated timeline that we are working towards.
Okay.
Yes, but it's a future event.
And this will fix all those issues we just mentioned.
Yes, that's the
Okay.
intention.
Okay.
I also just want to make the point that we've been, the plant may have been there for as long as it has, but up until recently, we have not been in a position to pass adequate material consistently over prolonged periods into the actual flotation side of this plant to be able to attend to commissioning and or whatever other issues that we need to attend to. So it's really only since the fix associated with the comminution that we've seen that part of the plant run for 24-hour periods consistently and consistently pass material through to start dealing and identifying all these other issues. And I think the fact that we've got to this stage, that we've got all of this done, planned, and ready to execute in a very short period of time is testament to the OEM that's working with us and to the commitment of our own people and staff.
Okay. Well, you mentioned there that the plant's been running. I mean, did you say that perhaps for longer than 24 hours? So have you passed that milestone of a continuous run for more than 24 hours yet?
On the components that are associated with the milling, the comminution, getting the correct material into the correct slurry densities, into the thickener, through that component of the plant, yes, we are now comfortable that we've resolved those issues and we can run that part of the plant subject to a machinery breakdown that's not anticipated. But we can now run that part of the plant adequately and control it properly.
Okay. And do you anticipate that these fixes then will be the last sort of fixes outside of perhaps normal balancing to maximize grade? I know there was some control systems issues as well that you're perhaps looking at.
Look, I do think that this is likely to be the end. There may be, I mean, I can give you examples of, if you go right to the front end of the plant, there are still some issues associated with sorters. We're working our way around this at the moment. It's not satisfactory and it won't stay there long term. It can't. That's being dealt with separately. And right at the back end of the plant, if you come right to where material is bagged, there are a couple of screw feeders and bits and pieces like this that are not at optimum, but none of this stops us. It doesn't make it as easy as we'd like it to be to get material into a bag, get it weighed, but it doesn't stop us doing it. So there are some issues at each end that will resolve and will fine-tune and will improve and so on as we go forward. But I anticipate, to repeat, that when these fixes are in on the float plant, that we'll see a float plant running properly.
Okay, well, that's good to hear, George. I want to just move on to the placing, or in fact, the two RNS placings that came out this week here. The first question really is, it was at a 15%. The first one was at a 15% discount. Why was that? Well,
I think that normally one will find that there is a discount to the bid price, and that has historically been the case. I just would like to just expand a little onto this, and that is that running this mine and going through the process we are going through it takes a lot of money. It costs to try and get the correct amount of material out of the ground onto the ROM pads, the entire running of it. I mean, there are probably 300 people that are working in this environment at the moment. You have a mining fleet. I think my last count was 15 730 ADTs and 5 excavators running and so on. We have our own fleet at the plant for front-end loading and so on. It's a big milling system that's in. There's use of reagents. There's all sorts of things that are ongoing. This is not a case of buying new kit. This is a case of us making sure that we meet the operational expenses that are associated with getting this plant to the point where it can produce profitably.
Okay, and of course, as well as covering those elements there, a question that came in was for the AGM notice. You'd said about raising that headroom would help to cover the JRG fees there, the loan facility from yourself, and also China Zenith Capital. So does the recent funds raised from placing, do they cover any of those 3 elements there?
Well, certainly on the OPEX side, which is where JRG are, yes, it does.
Okay.
In terms of what the company wants to do with the shares and or funds that is due to me, that's an ongoing discussion. That's in the background. Nothing has been done on that, and nothing will be done there that prejudices the company in any way at all. And I think I've been very, very clear on that.
Okay.
You know, the other matters will be dealt with as well in due course, but not the intention certainly isn't out of any funds raised. The funds raised are for the operation at Zulu primarily at the moment.
Okay. I also noticed, of course, you've got that $300,000 loan facility from the Zimbabwean lender. Is that the first, let's say, funding of that sort of nature? And I mean, to kind of anticipate more of that as you get into that production. When you said you needed to put a bag of product on a desk before you'll get a commitment.
Look. I think we have a very good relationship with that institution, and the indications are that as we go forward, I think that we will be able to extend that facility.
Okay.
And you know, I don't want to talk too strongly about something that hasn't happened, but I think that that's a giant step in the direction I've been trying to get us to go for some time.
Okay. Yes. Good. Okay. I do just want to push some concerns that I picked up from shareholders here regards the placing here, in terms of sort of, is it the last placing, or how long does it cover you for? Because I get the feeling that there's some sort of frustrations here, certainly about the discount first of all, and shareholders sort of waking up and seeing another sort of placing RNS and feeling a bit like, disappointed. People who've been perhaps following the story here, quite excited to see developments and the company get into production, to then sort of see themselves sort of diluted. So, I mean, can you say who that placing has gone to? You said it was strong institutional investors.
Mark, look, to the extent that can be disclosed, is disclosed in the RNS. And generally it's run under CMC markets. They are FCA regulated. They're a public company. But that generally is how it's done. But I think that the other part of your question tends to relate to access to this sort of opportunity to other shareholders. And,
Indeed.
And I can only express and get my knuckles rapped for doing so if necessary, my own frustration at the difficulties that are kind of thrown at me when I want to go and want to have a direct forum of some kind with our shareholders and be offering this to shareholders. I mean, for example, an open offer to shareholders. I've been advocating this personally for some time. I must have had, a trainload of objections and reasons thrown at me from advisors and all sorts, all over the place, as to why I shouldn't be doing it. I hear it all, but I don't agree with it. If I could find a mechanism for addressing shareholders easier and directly, and being able to make these opportunities available, I would do so, because I think it's the right way to go. So those are just personal thoughts and frustrations that I have over it. I don't know what the answer to that is. If I had it, we would have implemented it by now.
Okay, okay. I know some people were saying sort of things like primary bid, for example, might be an option. I can maybe look into that a bbit more and see, yeah, how that sort of mechanism works. I mean, you do, I suppose, you get into production and you get the revenues coming in, all will be forgiven, sort of thing. But the frustrations are definitely there that people are sort of waking up and seeing discounted placings, further dilution to their shareholding, and they sort of wonder when it's going to end. And I don't know if you can answer that question, if it's the last placing or not.
I can't answer questions like that because, once again, they're future related. I
Sure.
can say that it affects me as much as anybody else. I am probably the most uncomfortable person around Prem at the moment because of these delays. I find them acutely embarrassing personally. They've annoyed me. A lot of them have been unnecessary. Um, there has been, I wish I had perfect hindsight. I don't, but I also often sit and analyze to try and understand where things could have and should have, even without hindsight, been a little different. Um, so yeah, I can't kind of give any of those undertakings. I can only say that in everybody's interests, it's something I don't want to see. I want it brought to a head. I want to see this mine generating what it should be doing. And I want to see it then develop itself into the higher production levels that will see the profitability that should be there, into the diversity of what comes out of a pegmatite. There are other products that come out of it that we should be looking at. And then, as soon as possible, to try and move this to a point where we can add further value through further processing of what we're producing, of the SC6. I don't believe that exporting SC6 is where this mine is going to be for the next life of mine. I don't think that's where it is, and I don't think it's where it should be. And we are looking at those. For some time, I had lost sight of some of that with the complexities of just trying to make this plant work. But I must say, my mindset is much wider at the moment, and I've started looking again actively at these other opportunities, the extensions, the byproduct, the modification of what we produce, and so on. And then, in particular, the opportunities associated with the additional claims we've registered within our historic EPO area. And we don't know if the EPO is going to be extended or not, but it would be good if it is. But if it isn't, we've registered claims within it for where we see a lot of mineralization. So I think that the future of this thing is looking better by the day.
Okay, and I mean, it is good to see institutions taking an interest as well, because they are generally considered less, more risk averse, let's say. But yeah, I mean, I did notice, I think there's some communication or something that you perhaps mentioned. It was a good omen that an institution had come in expressing interest at the bid price of yesterday.
Yes, I think, Mark, I think that's the point that I wanted to make, is that people had wanted actively and pushed us strongly to accept more money that close to the bid price, I think is a very good omen.
Okay.
That kind of says to me that there are some people out there, if they're prepared to put in that significant monies at that closer point to the bid price, their anticipation obviously has to be a much more positive one.
Okay. I do want to just finish off on a bit of the resource here, given, of course, there was news this week on this higher grade feed, that 1.1 to 1.7%. Actually, someone asked me to ask you, are you sure that that is the correct grade? Because that's, of course, a lot higher. And actually, that's where you want to be. That's like a tier 1 sort of grade, isn't it? Where is it coming from? Is it from the main area, from the EPO area?
Mark, the feed going into the plant at the moment is a combination. Some of it is coming from some of the claims within our EPO area. And where the history of that is that there was a fair amount of illegal artisanal work that was done. And a lot of guys had exposed a lot of ore on surface. Now, effectively, they have nowhere to go with it. And what we've said to them is, okay, we'll take this, but it gets hand cobbed first of all. Get the waste out of it, deliver it by the 30-ton truckload, and we'll take it from you. And some of the at Zulu assays that have been coming in on some of that stuff have indicated, and I've said this, and I think I've had it in RNSs, I've certainly had it in interviews before now, some of this has been showing as much as 37, 38% of the ore as being spodumene. Now, if you think that 100% spodumene has a grade of 8.03% Li2O equivalent, if you take 30% of that, you're already talking 2.4% Li2O. Go to 38%, it's gone a bit higher. So a fair amount of that has been coming in. It's obviously not enough, doesn't cover everything that we will need going into the future. That, and then coupled to the fact that we are mining actively out of our own pit at the moment, and what we're seeing coming from the pit is very much in line, I think, with what I'd expected to see, which was going to be over 1%.
Okay.
I have my own views in terms of how geos go about modeling and what they do, but not to be quoted on that one. So I'm not surprised at all to see that, not in the slightest.
Okay. And how do you deal with the sort of, let's say, variability of the grade coming in? Because of course the mineral resource estimate, the new mineral resource estimate out a few weeks ago was officially there at 0.45, and now you're sort of talking sort of over 1%. Of course, you've gone down the fast track route. There's no sort of DFS that would give that definitive kind of average grade. But how do you sort of deal with the, I'm going to say, sporadic nature of the different grades coming in?
Mark, there are a couple of things there. First of all, let me start off and say that we established that if 4%, as low as 4% of the ore on the ROM pad is spodumene, and it's subject to the same liberation standards as everything else, that ore can be processed through the plant, and we can recover spodumene from it. And on that basis, we applied no cutoff in our own pit when it came to our own resource estimate, which I believe is the right way to go about it. The other point that I wanted to make is that what will float in the final spodumene recovery circuit is the spodumene you put in. Now, if what you feed into the spodumene recovery float circuit is 12%, for example, of the dry solids being spodumene, you can expect to recover a percentage of it. If that recovery is 80%, for example, then you can very comfortably forecast how much spodumene in bags, or SC6, you would expect. If what is getting into the float plant is 20% spodumene and you recover 80%, it's obviously more. So this is a self-adjusting situation. Obviously, the higher that you can put in, the more you're going to recover at the end of the day, the more efficient your process is. But it isn't a case of having to make a change to the plant. That isn't what happens.
So the plant can cope regardless, but does it make it more difficult to forecast or predict what you might get if the grade is changing from area to area? Just on that point with the because there's very different grades there, 0.45 now 1.7.
Yes. So in terms of trying to provide a forecast, a revenue-based forecast eventually of this, this kind of conversation will indicate to you why it is likely to be of a very conservative nature. And I think that's generally what you will see in most mining and most resource and processing environments.
Okay.
You cannot enter, I don't know of a, I don't know, maybe there are some, but generally speaking, to have a deposit in the ground that is exactly the same all the way through and doesn't have any variance would be very strange.
Yeah, indeed. No, indeed. And again, I think this comes down to the whole fast track idea. Yeah, you don't have that sort of definitive DFS. But I mean, if you're confident that it's good and it's going to work and be revenue generating, then that's the main thing. I do just want to finish on a couple of points. Matare, I know last time you said you're working on an agreement with the joint venture partner, which could lead to an independent funding for Matare. Is that still the case? That's still being worked on?
That is still the case. The draft agreements are out at the moment.
Okay, fine. The only other point I want to finish off with, George, here is you mentioned a milestone next week, and Premier believes that you're now in the home stretch with commissioning the Zulu plant operation. SC6 is going to be held back until we have sufficient grade material to ship to our prepayment and offtake partner. So, I mean, it does sound very much like you are getting there. Small problems are being sorted out. The big question is when, I know you've got your export permit you applied for last time we spoke. How are you feeling on when you're going to be able to get that shipment?
I'd like you to ask me that question on Saturday. Not this Saturday, next Saturday. No. I'll give you an answer. Okay. How's that?
All right, I will do. Well, thank you very much for your time, George, today. Lots covered in that interview, and we'll speak again in due course.
Thanks, Mark.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like, or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.